Okay, in terms of stuff, welcome to PHI 1100, Critical Inquiry. Today we'll do the usual first day exciting stuff, namely signing the attendance thing, so you can lift those attendance holds, and then of course going over first day stuff. So if your name is on here already, just initial a mark in the column by your name, and if you've added to the class since yesterday, just write your name down at the bottom, and I'll go on a rattler after my next class, put people down as attending, as they attended, and then of course update the attendance stuff. Okay, as I mentioned, this is PHI 11100, and we'll go through the super basics of the syllabus. Rather than just sort of simply read it at you, I'll go over some of the highlights so you know what to expect, what's going on, etc. I'm Dr. LaBossiere, got a PhD from Ohio State back in 1993. Started teaching here in fall of 1993. I've been here ever since, so I've been doing this a super long time. This, of course, is spring 2019. My office is down second floor, back 203. And here's the contact information. Phone number for my office, and of course my email. And email probably the best because that works 24 hours a day, and who uses phones anymore? I actually went through all of grad school with no phone. It was great. It was super great. Because if people wanted stuff from you, they had to come walk over and find me to get stuff. Office hours, Tuesday 1:50 to 3, on Wednesday 11 to 2, and Thursday 1:50 to 4. If I do have to miss my office hours, I'll always announce well ahead of time, and if you might have already seen the announcement, I'm on all of the committees and they have lots of meetings. And so before the semester even begun, I already have meetings slotted in on Wednesdays, etc. But I'll always let you know ahead of time when a meeting affects the class. So far there's nothing actually impacting the class except for the convocation Thursday, and my meetings are usually on Wednesdays, so they'll only impact the office hours and not the class itself. But again, I'll always let you know ahead of time so you don't come to my office and not have me there. So what is this course about, and how is it organized? Well, if you had a class with me before, I always go with the 4-part structure for some reason. Part 1 deals with sort of the basics of critical thinking, and critical thinking, put kind of generically, is this. It involves getting a claim, a statement that is either true or false, and rationally judging whether the claim excuse me, is true, false, or third option people often forget about, where you can suspend judgment and say, I don't know. But people are often quick to say it's got to be true or got to be false, but they forget that in some cases you can honestly say, I don't know. And we'll spend the entire course of the course going through how to take claims and see whether they're true, false, or don't know. In part 1, begin with chapter 1, critical thinking basics. Now this textbook has been around a long time, and one thing that happens with textbooks that have been around a long time is they have to keep changing them to keep selling new copies, because old copies sell for less, and new copies sell for ridiculous amounts. And so what they often do is kind of move the chapters around. And so even though we'll go, 1, 3, 4, etc., the organization actually does make sense. Because in the original book, this order was the original order, which made a lot of sense, and they just started moving stuff around. So that's why we're leaping around chapters, not because I'm just like randomly picking chapters, but because this is the order that actually makes the most sense. Then we'll hop to chapter 3, but don't worry, we'll return to chapter 2 in the future, looking at clear thinking, critical thinking, and clear writing. Then we'll go to chapter 4, which is credibility. Now, credibility and issues of it have always been important, but especially today. Everyone's heard the terms, fake news, alternative facts, etc. And we'll look at the important questions of, when you get a claim, how do you tell when it's true, based on judging the content of the claim itself, and also judging the credibility of the source. Again, this has always been important, because there's always been deceivers and con artists and liars. But of course today it's even more important, because again, when you hear people saying things like alternative facts and fake news, and truth is no truth, then it's even more important to understand credibility, and what you should accept and what you should not, or at least doubt. Then in part 2, we'll go to looking at rhetoric and fallacies. And we'll look at them from the standpoint of good and evil, and also neutral. From the standpoint of neutral, we'll simply see what these things are. What is rhetoric? And as we'll see in the future, it is the art, perhaps the science, of persuasion, making people feel a certain way through your words and gestures so they believe a certain way. And as we'll see, rhetoric has nothing to do with truth. All you do when you use rhetoric is try to make people feel a certain way so they believe a certain way. Whether it's true or false, doesn't matter. To use an analogy, rhetoric is kind of like the flavoring of food, or putting like sweeteners or sugar on it. It doesn't make the food any more nutritional when you flavor it, but it makes it more likely that people will eat it. So rhetoric is kind of the flavoring spice of, hopefully logic, but often not logic. Now, this is not to say that rhetoric is bad, because you wouldn't want to eat bland, tasteless food. Likewise, with good logic, there's nothing wrong with making your logic appealing and, I guess, delicious. But of course, if all something offers is just flavor with no substance, then you have a reason to accept it. Now, on the standpoint of evil, we'll look at how you can use rhetoric to sway people to believe things, whether they're true or false. On the standpoint of good, we'll see how to defend against this. So you can recognize common rhetorical devices, so people will have a harder time trying to deceive, fool, and sway you. Then we'll move away from rhetoric to actual fallacies. Now, fallacies, even though the term often gets thrown around as being wrong about the facts, a fallacy is this. It's bad logic. It's a mistake in reasoning. Now, a factual error is just getting the facts wrong, just saying something that is untrue. Now, of course, a lie is different from that. Lying is saying something untrue, knowing it's untrue, and doing it for malicious reasons. So someone could make a factual error, but not be lying, because they could truly believe it, not be trying to deceive you, but just be wrong. They might be wrong about the time something occurs and not realize it, or mistaken in the answer to a math problem. Now, a fallacy, though, is bad logic. Now, sometimes people use these maliciously, as we'll see, to try to sway and manipulate people, and they're super useful for that. If you're trying to sway people, the last thing you want to use is good logic. Really. It is terrible for persuasion. Rhetoric is great, bad logic is great. So in a way, the worse your logic, the less logic you've got, the more persuasive you'll be. It makes me sad because I teach critical thinking. Now, on the side of neutrality, we'll see these various fallacies. Things like straw man, ad hominem, false dilemma. And we'll see how they work. On the side of evil, you'll see how you can employ these things like scare tactics and ad hominems and appeals to tradition to sway and confuse and mislead people. And on the side of good, we'll see how to defend against them, how to recognize them and diffuse them. So chapter 2, or part 2, will be all about no logic and bad logic. How to recognize it, how to use it, how to defend against it. And this has always been important, but it's again even more important these days, when so much is just empty rhetoric and bad logic. Then we'll head to more formal style logic. In part 3, we'll focus on what's called inductive logic. Inductive logic gets defined differently in different fields, but since philosophy owns logic, I guess we get to define it. It's when you reason from evidence that doesn't guarantee your conclusion, your point you're trying to prove, but makes it likely that it'll be true. Inductive reasoning deals with probability. And it's something we already do, and do well. Because if you didn't do it well, you wouldn't have survived to be here. One example is everyday inductive reasoning is a classic example of someone burning their hand on a stove, or getting hurt. Like you burn your hand on the stove and you reason, I burned my hand that time, so what's going to happen next time? going to burn again. And so if someone's good at reasoning, they stop touching hot stoves because they realize that's going to hurt. And that's inductive reasoning. Now it only deals in probability because sometimes when you touch the stove, it's not hot. And maybe sometimes it might not hurt because it's not hot enough. And we'll spend all of part 3 looking at inductive reasoning. And this includes all kinds of useful stuff, namely things like inductive generalizations. You've seen these in the form of polls and surveys, like when they say 40% of Americans support Donald Trump, or 22% of Americans really hate Congress. And those are gotten from inductive generalizations. We'll also look at things like analogies, etc. And then in chapter 11, we'll look at causal reasoning. And this is very important because this is how we reason about things that can kill us or be beneficial to us, figuring out how stuff works. And again, we're already pretty good at this because we've survived this far, but we can always get better. And we'll look at causal reasoning on the individual level, addressing questions like, why isn't my phone working properly, how do I fix it, to large-scale reasoning like, what effect does, say, consumption of sugar have in the general population? Or what effect does, say, gun control legislation have on the general population? So individual causal reasoning, like how does this thing work and what does it do, to large-scale stuff in populations. Then, last but not least, we'll get to the most formal of formal logics, the deductive logic. Now, deductive logic in philosophy is defined by certainty. If you're doing a deductive argument properly, it always takes you from true evidence to a true conclusion. So if you have true evidence and you do a perfect deductive argument, your result is always going to be true. That's the idea. We'll look at the first, kind of the starter logic, developed by our good dead friend Aristotle long ago, called Categorical Logic, which is about cats. Well, no, it can be about cats, but it's about categories. Things being in a category or not in a category. Then we'll finish up with truth functional logic, which is basically the foundation of the internet. Oddly enough, if you're using like Instagram or Facebook or playing Xbox or Switch, etc., you are playing truth functional logic, because that is the foundation of all other stuff. So that'll be our adventures through the parts. So that's the map for the course. Before pressing on, anything about that stuff, or cats, that needs more stuff? Now, an important part of any class is the grading stuff. And here is the grading stuff for this class. There are 3 main categories for the grade: the assignments, the exams, and the quizzes. The good news, or bad news, depending on how you feel about the demons of Blackboard, is all the stuff is on Blackboard. And it's been carefully crafted so people can take it online, and the grade curve is remained constant, because everyone gets their own, lovingly crafted or hatefully crafted Blackboard exams pulled from huge databases. So what are these categories, and how do they work, etc.? Well, the first one, in no particular order, are the assignments. And there's about 25, 27 of these, and the best 10 of these count. Now, one thing to note is, people always ask about this in the semester, but when Blackboard is counting your best 10 assignments, or as we'll see, best exams, best quizzes, it won't delete your old ones. You won't see them vanish. You won't see them hidden. Well, that doesn't make sense, but they'll always still be visible. So when you're looking at your grades, once you've done, say, 20 assignments, you won't see like 10 of them just disappear. And if you do, that's a problem. So Blackboard is keeping your best 10 quizzes. It's not doing it visibly. It's not erasing them and especially marking them. It's just using them for the calculation. Again, at the end of the semester, people always ask me, when are you going to drop the lowest ones, etc. But Blackboard's doing it in real time. In fact, it's doing it right now. So the assignments work like this. For each section, 1 through 4, there's a folder on Blackboard with a bunch of assignments in it. And when you start up an assignment, they're untimed, because they're like the traditional, homework assignment. You just do them on Blackboard. And once you start them, you have until the deadline, which for part one is February 1st. So you can open one up, look at it, work on it a little bit, go away, come back, work on it a little more, go away, come back, work on it a little more. But just be sure to save it and submit it by, in the case of part one, by February 1st. They're always, yes, yeah, good question. The deadlines, with the exception of the final exam, deadlines are always end of day that day. So 11:59 p.m. on February 1st, the assignments of part one, no longer accessible. It doesn't erase them, they're just, you just can't do it. If you've already done them, the scores, of course, are kept. The assignments are always about the part of the course we're doing, so all the assignments for part one are for part one. And again, you can look at them because they're not on a timer, they're on a calendar, so you can open it up, look at it, and work on it as you wish. They're 30% of your grade, and again, Blackboard automatically keeps your best 10. Now, because of that, Blackboard is now keeping your best 10 assignments, and you probably haven't done any. So right now it's keeping 10 zeros, which is correct, because right now you've got 10 zeros, those are your best assignments, and so currently if you haven't done anything, your grade is 0. Exams. There are 5 exams in total, best 4 count. And again, Blackboard won't delete or hide, the one exam that doesn't get counted. It just automatically calculates it using your best 4. Now, the first 4 exams, each of them are made of 50 questions, 25 true false, 25 multiple choice. Every time an exam is generated, it's generated randomly from a database of thousands of questions. Well, in theory, you could take the same exam twice, but the odds are really super low. Now, for the exams, once you fire up an exam, you're on a timer. To use an analogy, it's like going to the movies. If you go to a movie, the movie starts, and you can leave anytime you want. You want to go and get some popcorn, whatever, you can do that. But of course, they don't stop the movie for you, it keeps on going. And the exams are the same way. You can leave the exam, but the timer just keeps on ticking. So if you go away for like 30 minutes and come back, the timer will have ticked 30 minutes. So when you do one, be sure to only start it when you got time to finish it, because it will keep on ticking. The final, somewhat different. The final covers all of this stuff. Parts 1 through 4. It's 2 hours long, you get 2 hours to take it, and it's 100 questions. Also, it deadlines at the end of the normal final time, even though it's on Blackboard, so that way you have the full normal time. So Wednesday, May 1st, 5 p.m., that's when you need to have the final done, if you need to take it. Now, as you can see, the best 4 to 5 exams count, which can mean a couple things. One is that once you do as many assignments as you want, hopefully at least 10, and 4 exams, and enough quizzes, you can look at your overall grade and see what that is. And your overall grade is your real-time grade in the class. And the way that's calculated is this. Blackboard pulls your 10 best assignments, and that's 30% of the grade. It pulls your best 4 exams, that's 40%. It pulls your best 10 quizzes, that's 30%. Now, of course, right now, if you've done nothing, it's pulling 10 zeros, 4 zeros, and 10 zeros, which, of course, a huge stack of zeros is still 0. So that's why your overall grade will look terrible now. So if you go on there, you're like, crap, I've already failed the class, and it's not even day 1. Oh no, that's where your grade is if you did nothing. And so, when you look at your overall grade, that's what you get if you just said, I'm done. No more quizzes, no more assignments, no more exams. I'm just not going to do more stuff. And that would be, your overall grade would be that real grade. Now, once you've done the 4 exams, and quizzes and assignments, you can look at your overall grade and decide, do you need the final? Because I assume no one actually wants a final, but to see if you need it. So how do you tell? Well, if your overall grade is an A before taking the final, unless you just really like taking finals, you're done, because you've got an A. There's no more A than A. There's no A pluses, unfortunately. If your grade is less than an A, Then what you can do is get the grade estimator, which is on Blackboard in the course documents, and there's an Excel version and there's a Google Sheets version. They work the same way. It has all the instructions in there. Basically what you do is you put in your assignment grade, your quiz grade, you put in your best 3 exams, and then put a hypothetical 100 in for the final. And if that result is a letter grade or more, better than your overall grade, then taking the final could be worthwhile. Now the final can never hurt your grade, because if you tank the final and it's worse than your other 4 exams, it gets dropped. So doing more stuff can never lower your grade. The worst that happens is if you do more stuff and it's all terrible, your grade stays the same. If it's better, your grade would keep going up. But what you do can never make your grade go down. So once you've done the 4 exams, you can see, do you need the final or not? And the final's there to help you. Odd thing to say, but it is there to help you, because if you do the 4 exams and you haven't hit the grade you wanted, the final could replace your worst exam that's better. So it's a way to boost your grade. And if you're satisfied with your grade, you don't have to take the final. So it's optional, and the only thing you can do is either leave your grade alone or help it. And these are 40%. Quizzes. There's a bunch of quizzes for each part. Each part gets a folder full of quizzes. They're 5 questions, true, false, and they're timed. Once you start one up, you get 5 minutes on the clock, and just like the exams, it keeps on ticking. So if you start the quiz, leave, come back 4 minutes later, you only have a minute left. Or if you come back 6 minutes later, then you'll have nothing left. There's a bunch of these quizzes, like 20-something of them, and the best 10 of them count. Now, if you get 10 perfect assignments, you'd be assignment capped. You'd be at 100%, and the only reason to take more would be just if you like taking assignments. Same with the quizzes. If you get 10 perfect quizzes, you have 100% in your quiz category, and then there'd be no reason to take quizzes unless you just like taking quizzes, or you want to see more questions or something. And the same with exams. If you get 4 hundreds on the exams, there's nothing above 100, so you just have perfect exam score. So that's the grade categories. Before pressing on, anything about how this stuff works, it needs any stuff.
So how are your exams set up? Like questions?
Oh, good question. There are, each one, the 4 kind of normal ones, each one is 50 questions, 25 true, false, 25 multiple choice, and each one is limited, except for the final, to its section. So exam 1, part 1, just part 1. Exam 2, part 2, just part 2. Exam 5 is the exception because it covers all the parts. Is it? Grade scale, pretty standard. 9 to 100A, 80 to 9B, 70 to 79C, 60 to 69 D, 0 to 59 F. Since PMU doesn't have pluses or minuses, what I do, if someone gets like a, on the 9 side, 0.1 or better, then it would round up. So 79.1 would round up to 80, 69.1 to 70, etc. Now Blackboard won't do that. You think it would be able to handle decimals, but try to set it that way. And maybe I'll check again, because I haven't checked since a couple weeks ago. But when you'll see on Blackboard, if you have like a 79.9, it'll still look like, it'll still be reported as a C, but when I go to put in the grades, I'll round it up later.
In regards to assignments, I saw McGraw Hill Connect. Will they be directed from Blackboard, or is the McGraw Hill just for access to the book?
Just for access to the book. The actual, good question, the actual assignments are the ones on Blackboard. So you don't need to go to that. Okay, there's a whole bunch of policies. Again, I won't read the syllabus at you, but essentially this stuff. And nothing really specific to say about that, except all this stuff's on the syllabus, and we'll lay out, all the details of things. And there's nothing really weird or unusual in there, I hope, just kind of standard stuff. I do have a frequently asked question PDF on Blackboard. So if you have a question about something, you can look it up there, or you can just ask me. Grade discussions, usual deal is, if you're concerned about your grade, to stop by during office hours, ask me about it. With Blackboard, it's usually pretty straightforward because it's all auto-grading and all the stuff's there. For your grades, definitely want to keep up with the grades on Blackboard. As I said, your overall grade is your real-time grade. Again, it'll look horrible until you actually get enough scores in there. Because it's kind of like a progress bar in like a video game. It's slowly filling up, and it's only counting, it's not giving you your average, it's giving you what you get if you just stopped there. And you can use an analogy, it'd be like if you can see if you have a job, you can see your paycheck building up over the week. That's what you get paid if you just stop then and just stop working. And the grade thing works the same way. It's like if you just stop, that's the grade you get. And again, it's not your average, and people often panic about that. They'll look at it and say, oh my God, I've got a 23, but how did this happen? And again, it's your grade you've accumulated so far, not your actual average. Makeups, really in a way, they're kind of obsolete now, because the way it's set up, everything's on Blackboard, you have months to do it, and the only way you need to make it is if something truly disastrous happens. Which takes us to unusual or special circumstances. If you are in unusual or special circumstances that affect the class, and since they're unusual or special, I don't know what they might be, let me know as soon as possible, because the earlier I know, the more I can do. If someone contacts me like in, let's say, August, saying I had some problems in your class, I'd be like, oh, that's terrible, but there's nothing I can do. Okay, this is the Academic Learning Compact. So if administrator says, did he mention it? You can say, yes, he did. It's laid out in the syllabus as well. The QEP is, of course, right on FAMU. And if you're asked by administrator, you mention it, I have. Now, we won't be directly writing papers in this course because it's not a Gordon 1 class, but we'll be going over stuff that does relate to writing. So it does connect to the QEP, which is, of course, right on FAMU. The calendar, same as the one here. I'll always put the stuff on the board, the start of class, that way you always know when stuff is due. And again, it's broken into 4 parts. Now, one thing that is maybe slightly confusing is this. For all the quizzes and assignments, there are only deadlines. A deadline means if it's not done by then, not done. So the quiz and assignments part 1, deadline February 1st, part 2, March 1st, part 3, April 5th, part 4, April 26th. Essentially, a month for each set. And the only thing you have to really worry about is, do I have the stuff done by 11:59 p.m., at that date? Everything is available now, so you can start doing stuff as soon as you want. But with the assignments, it's no problem, because again, they stay open until the end of the section. But it's a bad idea to hop into an exam or a quiz before you know that you can do it. Now for the exams, there's also, for each one, there's a sample exam, which doesn't count for you or against you because it's a sample. So before taking a real exam, one thing that would be a good idea to do is take the sample one, because first, it doesn't count against you, so if it's a disaster that doesn't count against you, like practice. Also, you can see the sort of questions that I write. It's from the same database as the real test. Again, the difference is it doesn't count against you. Now, on the minus side, it doesn't count for you, so you don't get credit for doing it. But on the plus side, you don't get any points against you. So you can go in and go through it, take it, look at it, see how it goes. If a practice test goes well, then a real test should go well as well. If a practice test is a burning disaster, then the real one will probably be that as well. Now again, I recommend that even though everything's available now, it's generally not a great idea to hop into stuff right away. People have done this. I had someone try to do everything the first couple of days, and they said, yeah, I failed exam 1, so I jumped to exam 2 and failed that even worse, so I thought, hey, I'll try exam 3, and guess what, I failed that terribly too, and then I went to 4, I'm like, guess what happened? I'm like, failed that too? It's like, yeah. I was like, I didn't see that coming. Yeah, so don't just jump into them without being sure you're ready to take them. Now with the exams, there's a due date and deadline. Again, which is a bit confusing, but here's the difference. The due date for an exam is the date on which we finish that stuff. That's when you should probably take it by then. The deadline, which is a month later, with the exception of exam 4 and exam 5, because there is no more month after that, that's when you have to complete it, because otherwise it's no longer available. So we'll finish up part 1 by February 1st, but you have until March 1st to complete exam 1, because we'll be done with the stuff then, and move on to part 2, but so don't have to mess around with makeups, etc. The exam just stays open to the end of the next section. So you effectively have 2 months to finish exam 1. And then with exam 2, once you finish part 2, you get another month beyond that to finish exam 2, and then likewise for the exam 3, you have another month beyond that. Now again, when you get to exam 4, in the final, there's no more beyond that, because that's the end. So exams 1 through 3, you always get an extra month after we finish up that stuff. But 4 and 5, they're just done when they're done, because no more time. Okay, so that's the schedule. Now since everything is on Blackboard, nothing really changes this. So if I get like sick or hit by a truck or something, Blackboard will still be there to do all the stuff. So this will almost certainly not change. Unless something like really weird happens. Now, when taking exams or quizzes, sometimes things go wrong. You know, the demons of Blackboard, etc. Now, if something goes wrong, thing to do is send an email with your name, the class, and the thing that is wrong. And the reason why I need your name, obvious, and the class, also because I have multiple classes, and they're all philosophy classes, so just say like critical inquiry. And of course I need to know the thing or things that have gone wrong. Now my default is to clear the attempt. As you might know, Blackboard has 2 options for instructors. I can submit the attempt as it is, or I can clear the attempt and just make it like it wasn't taken. My default, unless you say otherwise, is always, if I do see there's a problem there, I just go and clear it. And Blackboard does log everything. So if something went wrong, it has red text there saying, this is what went wrong. And I'll see that something went wrong and let's clear it. Now, if something goes wrong and you don't want it cleared, let me know. For example, suppose you're working on test 3, you get to question 49, and then the demons of Blackboard strike and you crash out of the test. Ah, crap. But you really don't want to go through and do the whole test again for one more question. In that case, you'd email me saying, hey, Blackboard, wiped out on me, can you just submit it for me, because I don't want to go through and do 50 questions for one. In that case, I'll do that. But again, my default is, if I do see the red text and there's a problem, is clear attempt. Now, the exams, the quizzes and stuff, deadline at midnight, but I am old and I do not stay up that late. So I'll monitor my email until typically 5 o'clock on deadline day, and then stop. I won't stay up all night just sitting there waiting for emails. So if there's a problem before 5 p.m., then I'll check my email and be able to fix it. If something happens after then I may check it, but probably not. So I extend the deadline to the day out of just give you a maximum time. But again, I only monitor it until about 5, because old and stuff. Okay, so that's the exciting syllabus. Anything about the syllabus that needs any more stuff? Okay, since we don't have class on Thursday because of the convocation, we'll go into some stuff. So, chapter 1. So, what are we trying to do in chapter 1? What are our objectives, our missions, our quest goals? Well, our goals are these things. And the book is pretty well designed in that it gives, at the start of each chapter, clear objectives. This is what we're trying to do. Then we do this stuff. And at the end of each chapter, which is really handy for studying for tests and quizzes, it has a pretty good recap of the things that have been. So first, we'll look at defining critical thinking. What is it? Then we'll look at distinguishing the objective claims from the subjective claims. And we'll look just a little bit at subjectivism and moral subjectivism. And if you really like ethics, there's also a night class, although it's full now, on Thursdays that talks all about ethics, all the time. Then we'll look at kind of the chunks, the mechanics of arguments. Namely, as we'll see, premises, the conclusion, we'll learn how to spot arguments, and look at what are called cognitive biases, ways that we're all screwed up, that mess up our thinking, and make us make lots of bad decisions. And then we'll wrap up with a look at the terms of truth and knowledge. And if you're interested in what knowledge is, there's also a class right after this one called epistemology, which deals with all kinds of knowledge. And there's seats open on that one, so if you need a class to round out your hours, there's still some seats there. You can sign up for epistemology. All about knowing stuff. So the obvious question is, what is critical thinking? And it's something we saw, briefly before. The short version is pretty short. The idea is you take a claim, a statement that is either true or false, and you assess it rationally, using the methods we'll go through in this course, to decide whether you should accept it as true in varying degrees, reject it as false with varying degrees of certainty, or suspend judgment and say, given the argument or the source, etc., I can't rationally decide whether it's true or false. And that's the short version. So critical thinking doesn't involve creating claims, brainstorming, thinking outside the box, under the box, beside the box, on top of the box, behind the box, or whatever. It just involves getting claims and assessing them. Is this true? Is it not? Can I go? Now all that other stuff, critical thinking, creative thinking, thinking outside the box, all that stuff is good stuff, but again, it's not part of actual critical thinking. Although, unfortunately, critical thinking became kind of a fad, so it started like getting all kinds of weird stuff stuffed into it. It's kind of unfortunate. So there's a super long version that's included in the book, but the gist of it is the best definition. It's rationally assessing claims to see if they're true, false, or they're not. And there's all kinds of other crap people have stuffed in there because it became a fact. So, what's good about critical thinking? Why have that? Well, on the side of good, a very practical thing is this. People are always trying to give us claims. We don't often think of it like people giving us claims, but we get all sorts of statements made by people. It can be, kind of large-scale stuff like on the news. The president is going to come on TV, supposedly today at 9, and make all kinds of claims. When you watch, YouTube or Amazon, etc., sometimes you have, commercials in there, and commercials make claims. When you talk to other people, they make claims. When you talk to your advisor, they make claims. And so, critical thinking is useful because the more you're able to tell what's true and what's BS, the more likely you're going to be successful and happy. Because if people are trying to deceive you, most of the time, although some of the time, it's not for your good. I mean, sometimes it is. Sometimes people do deceive, like around the holidays, people do deceive, I should put this on YouTube, I guess. People, tell their children untrue things to make them happy. But in general, when people are deceiving, it's not for your benefit. And so the better you can cut through that, the better you are making good choices. So one of the main advantages of critical thinking is your chance of being happier, healthier, and safer increase. because you're less likely to accept untrue stuff as true. Now this can be literally life and death stuff. For example, if you go onto like Amazon, there's all kinds of remedies and supposed medicines that are sold for various conditions. And if someone has something kind of serious, that like high blood pressure, or they have like a thyroid condition, and they decide to go with like some random thing on some random webpage or YouTube channel, or they review on Amazon, they could literally die by having bad information, things that simply aren't true. Now, the information they get may not be lying, the person who gives it may be believing it, but if you act on false information, that can quite literally kill you. So the main advantages of critical thinking are your chance of not dying, well, eventually we all die, so spoiler there, but your chance of dying early decreases, and your chance of being happier, healthier, and safer increases. So better off thinking critically. Also, switching to the side of evil, the better you are at critical thinking, the better you are manipulating other people. So if you want to be like evil and stuff, critical thinking is super useful for being evil. Now, weirdly, if you're an evil critical thinker, you don't use like logic to make your case, you use rhetoric and fallacies to sway and manipulate people who are not good at critical thinking. So if you're good at critical thinking and other people are not, you have a huge advantage, because you can manipulate them and they have no idea what's going on. They'll just gobble it all up and think it's great, and they'll have no idea they're being victims of fallacies and rhetoric, etc. So critical thinking is actually super dangerous, but super useful. Now, the main objective of critical thinking, as we saw, is this. Objectivists determine what is true. Now, there are other types of thinking, like strategic thinking, pragmatic thinking, where you just try to get achieve your goals, where truth doesn't matter. The only goal is do I get my political power? Do I get elected? Do I win this argument? But critical thinking is not about winning arguments, it's about getting to truth. And so in a way it's kind of abstract, but the idea is, again, truth. What are the methods? Well, the methods are essentially rationality. We'll look at the stuff in the course, recognizing rhetoric, recognizing fallacy, assessing inductive arguments for being strong and weak, assessing sources in terms of their credibility, assessing claims, and looking at deductive arguments. So lots of methods there. Now the thing we'll focus on is, of course, beliefs, things that people think are true. And what we'll do in our critical thinking, we'll take our beliefs and run them through, if they're, if we need to do so, run them through the methods to see if we really do have true beliefs or not. Now, one critical distinction that runs through all of philosophy and pretty much everything is what's called the objective-subjective distinction. Here's the idea. As we saw, a claim is something that is either true or false. Now, an objective claim is true or false regardless of what people think, believe, or feel about it. But kind of roughly, an objective claim tries to describe reality, tries to describe how things are. Non-controversial examples of objective claims would be things like the table is rectangular, that the sun is bigger than the earth, that a tablespoon of fat or olive oil has 100 calories. Those are all objective claims. They describe or try to describe reality. Now, objective claims are not necessarily true claims. For example, if I say this is an elephant, it's an objective claim, but it is false because it gets things wrong. Subjective claims just try to describe reality. They get things wrong or right. If they are well established, they are facts. Claims that are established as true beyond reasonable doubt. Subjective claims are also claims, but their hallmark is this. Subjective claims don't describe reality, they express our thoughts and feelings about stuff. So in a way, they're talking about, giving our reaction. For example, take the example of temperature. If I say it's 52 degrees outside, Fahrenheit, that's an objective claim. It is either true or false. But if I say that it feels cool or feels warm, that's a subjective claim, because cool and warm are not objective qualities of reality, they're how we feel about the qualities of reality. So, being from Maine, what's cool or cold for me is, it has to be really cold. 50 degrees, that's nice. 40 degrees, not bad. 30, still not too bad. 20 below, get a little cold. But then, of course, on the other side, when it gets to be 80, that for me, that starts being too warm, too hot. But, if someone's from, like a friend of mine from Puerto Rico, for her, 80 degrees is cool, 70 is too cold, and 90 is just right, which kills me. I almost died when I was in Puerto Rico. I didn't think I was going to make it. Something from Maine, it's like there in the middle of winter, and it's still like 90 degrees. And they had some of the tracks actually had laws, you had to wear shirts when running. And the police came and made me put on a shirt. I didn't think I was going to make it. But anyways, not because I was wearing a shirt, but because it was super hot. Because I can clearly wear shorts without dying. Or killer. So whether something feels warm or cool is a subjective thing. It's not objectively warm or cool, it's how you feel about it. Similarly, whether food is yummy or yucky. So if you say, for example, that plantains have a certain number of calories, certain vitamins and minerals and nutrients, that's objective. You can do an analysis of it to determine, calories, vitamins, and so on. But whether it's yummy or yucky depends on you. Like you want a scientist to say, yes, we've analyzed plantains, we found they contain 33, milligrams of yum and 12 milligrams of yuck. That's not a thing. What the yumminess or yuckiness is how we respond to it. So if I say plantains are nutritional, that's an objective claim. They are or they are not. If I say plantains are yummy, that's not objective. That's just my response to it. So objective claims are about reality. They are true or false, they get things right or wrong. Subjective claims, essentially as it says, they're just expressing our feeling or reaction to stuff, like plantains are yummy, 70 degrees is too warm, that chair is ugly. Those are all subjective things. Now, things, of course, can get kind of mushy and confusing. How so? Well, take this example. If I say, Sam thinks that plantains are yucky, that's an objective claim. Because either he thinks it or he doesn't. Because it's not expressing a feeling about Sam, it's saying what he feels about plantains. His feeling about them is subjective, but whether he feels that they're yummy or yucky is objective. Either he does or he doesn't. And so that can be a bit confusing. So if I say, for example, the chair is really ugly, subjective claim. If I say, I believe that I feel that the chair is ugly, that's objective. Because either I feel that or I don't. Because I'm not expressing my feeling, I'm making a claim that I feel it or I do not, which is objective. Now, to avoid being a jerk, I will generally not ask questions that smush that stuff together too much, too often. But it's a thing to be aware of. And again, kind of the rule of thumbs for this is, objective claims are talking about reality. Is this the case or is this not? And subjective is simply sort of expressing how we feel about that things are yucky or yummy or beautiful or ugly, etc. Now, we can, of course, think about thinking and report on thinking, and this falls under the objective thing. So if you say that Sam thinks that bananas are yucky, again, that would be an objective claim, because either he thinks it or he doesn't. Now, if he says bananas are yucky, subjective. If you say, Sam said that bananas are yucky, objective, because he did or he didn't. Facts and opinions. Now, facts, at least before like 2016, were claims that have been established as true beyond reasonable doubt. Now, a fact could turn out to be wrong, because when we say something's a fact, we're not claiming that's an absolute certainty. We're saying this has been established so strongly that it should be accepted as true. And the idea used to be, of course, that facts are objective. They're about reality. Now, opinion is simply someone's belief about stuff. Now, people often make the mistake that an opinion cannot be a fact. But you can have opinions that are facts. For example, I have the opinion that 2 + 2 is 4, which is also a fact. I have an opinion that the sun is bigger than the earth. It's also a fact. I have an opinion that plantains are problematic because my brain thinks they should taste like bananas because they look like bananas, but they don't, which is just weird. Because I really wanted to like them, but my brain just cannot accept the plantains. Weird experience. I guess if I grew up with them, it'd be fine, but I keep thinking my brain says banana, when it also says not banana. I can't handle that level of cognitive dissonance. So, fact versus opinion. Now, there's some opinions, again, that are subjective, some that are objective. So if someone says, well, that's just opinion, it doesn't mean that it has to be subjective. It could be a fact. Now, one thing that really messes stuff up is, well, actually 2 things. I'll throw an extra one for free. When it comes to ethics, if you're interested in ethics, again, there's a whole course on this, there's a position held by some thinkers called moral subjectivism. And it's a legitimate philosophical view. There are people who hold this and argue for it, and this is what they claim. They claim that morality is subjective. To use an analogy, taste in food is clearly subjective. If someone likes like a food combination, it may seem weird to other people, but if they like it, they like it. So if someone, say they like taking their cottage cheese, throwing in some pepperoni, pouring on some chocolate syrup, and then throwing on some raw salmon, probably a health risk, but if they like that, they like it. It tastes good to them. And my theory is that all of us have at least one really weird thing we like, really weird food. But I don't think it's weird because as long as no one's seen us eat it, they have no idea how weird we really are until your friends discover, like, oh my God, I can't believe you're eating that. But don't worry, everyone else has their weird thing too. So subjectivism is the idea that things are, in the case of taste, things are tasty means you just like them. And what you like can be very different from other people like. If you are a moral subjectivist, you believe morality works that same way. That what is good is what you feel is good. And what is morally wrong is what you feel is wrong. So if you're like capital punishment, yuck, you think it was wrong. If you're like capital punishment, yay, you think it was good. And on that view, no one is right and no one is wrong, because everyone's view is their own. So just like with food, no one can be wrong about their food. Like if you say, what is the best ice cream, and someone disagrees, they're not wrong, unless they name like a non-ice cream, then they would be wrong. But as long as they name an ice cream and they like it, they're not wrong, because there's no, to answer the question, what is the best ice cream, the only right answer is the one you like the best. And that's different for most people. Now, if you're a moral subjectivist, then the same holds for ethics. Is stabbing someone in the back of the head 22 times for no reason at all, is that bad? Well, it depends how you feel about stabbing people in the back of the head 22 times. Is napalming baby seals for fun bad? Well, it depends how you feel about napalm. Think it's pretty cool, then yeah, it's great. If you don't like that, if you feel kind of bad for the seals, then it's terrible. Now, one problem with ethical theory is this. We don't know which one is right. I mean, everyone thinks they get it right, but if we're being honest, we don't know which moral theory is correct. We don't know if morality really is objective or subjective or what. So if we don't know the answer to that question, how do we handle this problem? How do we handle thinking critically about ethics when it could be true that there is no right answer? There is no really good or bad, it's just, how we feel about stuff. Now, one way to reply to that is to argue for objective morality, which a lot of people do. People like Immanuel Kant, John Stuart Mill, Thomas Aquinas, Confucius, Aristotle, Plato, Dr. King, Mary Wollstonecraft. Lots of people believe in objective ethics. But if you don't buy objective ethics, how can you argue about ethics in a way that is critical thinking, but still accept maybe it could be subjective? Well, here's the fix. It's the same one I use in my ethics class. So it could be that morality is just people expressing how they feel. If you feel bad about baby seals being napalmed, you think it's bad. If you're cool with it, then it's fine. But when it comes to arguing about ethics rationally, there are some reasons that are seemingly objective, better reasons than others. So if you disagree about whether it's subjective or objective, we can still assess moral reason and say someone has made a better or worse case, even though there may really be no true answer. To illustrate, suppose we're arguing about the ethics of capital punishment. And capital punishment is what? You capital punish somebody, will they be around for lunch next Tuesday? Well, after someone's capitally punished, how many more lunches do they get? Anyone? 0. Because, well, capital punishment is what? How's it done? Yeah, they kill you all the way. Like that. The death charge. Yeah, so capital punishment kills people. Now, there's been, as you might imagine, a large moral debate about whether it's okay to kill people this way. Now, morality might be, again, subjective. It could be, yeah, there is no answer. You feel bad about, old Sparky, lighting people up, then it's bad. You feel good about it, it's good. But we can still look at good and bad reasons for a position. For example, suppose I say that capital punishment is evil. And here's my reasoning. If you notice that the word capital contains C, A, T, and you'll notice these 3 letters make up the word cat. And cats, as everyone knows, are evil. Therefore, by the principle of transitivity of cats, capital punishment is evil. Now that is an argument. I did offer reasons, but are those good reasons? Should I go to the governor and say, you must stop these capital punishments because of the cats? No, that would be pretty crazy. Yeah, so that's an argument for capital punishment being evil, but if you believe morality is subjective, you'd have to agree that it's not only a bad argument, but it is a pretty crazy argument as well, unless you understand cats properly. I mean, don't think that I don't like cats. I like cats precisely because they are evil. They hard commit to evil, and they do their stuff. And I respect that. I like dogs because dogs are good, and they hard commit to good. Everything should be what it is. Now, but suppose I give the following argument against capital punishment. Suppose I say that capital punishment is disproportionately applied to people based on economic class and race, and that there are significant numbers of people who are executed who are later exonerated by DNA evidence. And of course, if you kill someone, I mean, you can say, oops, sorry about killing you, innocent person, but you can't bring them back. Also, it's extremely expensive to do. People often argue, well, you just kill them and it's cheaper than just keeping in prison, but keeping in prison is actually weirdly cheaper. And so for those 3 reasons, that disproportionality, there's no way to undo it, and economic factors, and also you could throw in that it lacks deterrent value, therefore killing people serves no positive function, it is harmful, therefore it is wrong. Now you may not believe in objective morality, but is that a better argument than my cat argument? Yeah, because at least they're relevant. It's not talking about cats. So then if we think that morality is just subjective, we can still say whether the argument, for a position makes sense. Is it good, is it plausible, or is it, bad or even just super weird? So from a practical standpoint, until we know for sure whether ethics is objective, subjective, absolute, or relative, we can't really say for sure what ethics is. But we can say that there are arguments that are better or worse. So as a practical matter, when we're engaged in assessing moral argumentation, we can still assess it. Even though you may ultimately have the view that morality is just subjective, you can still say, yeah, that cat argument, that's terrible. The second argument is much better. Because the actual reasoning part would be objective. Before pressing on, anything about this stuff that needs more stuff? Issues. Now the book takes an issue-based approach to stuff, which is something I stole from other classes. You have to take like ethics or critical thinking. I do issue-based papers, because good idea. Now, we use the term issues in many ways. For example, if someone likes to dress up like a giant possum, skateboard around Tallahassee, whacking people with a styrofoam lightsaber, we would say they have various issues they should work on. But we don't think that these are the same thing as a critical thinking or philosophical issue. So what's the difference? Well, in critical thinking, an issue is this. It's a point of dispute for which there are two or more possible sides. Now both those parts are critical, because if there is no dispute, there is no issue. And if there are not two or more possible sides, again, there can be no dispute. So an issue then is, again, a point of dispute for which there are two or more possible sides. And they can range from really mundane, everyday, breakfast table issues to really big sweeping ones. For example, oddly enough, when you get up in the morning and think of what you're having for breakfast, you'll go through an issue. Like if you have multiple options, like if you get like cereal, bagels, toast, donuts, whatever, and you're deciding, should I have, cereal or bagels? And that's an issue, whether I should have cereal or bagels. We don't think of that as like a big sweeping issue, but again, it's an issue, something that you resolve, either by having, bagels or cereal, or maybe both, because breakfast is an important meal. There are, of course, bigger issues, such as, one could be obviously whether the federal government shutdown should continue or not, whether we should build the border wall or not, whether we should continue our involvement in Syria or not, whether Facebook should change their business model or not, whether you should remain on Facebook or not. Now, as you might have gathered from those examples, you can make almost anything into an issue. You can just say whether thing or not. Now, of course, you can also do it with whether, A, B, C, D, etc. But the basic idea is you have to have at least two options. If you only have one, like if you go and you're planning breakfast and you look and all you've got is like a bagel, well, the issue is pretty simple. What do I eat? I eat the bagel. That's all I've got. So how do you spot issues? Well, this sometimes can be easy, because if you get someone who's good at communicating, they'll make it clear to you what their issue is. In fact, they might say, the issue I'm addressing or subject I'm addressing is this, so you don't have to guess. In many cases, though, it won't be super clear, so you have to go in and dig around in there. So what are you looking for? You're looking for an issue. Well, you're looking for that dispute. So one way to spot it is this. If someone is doing, presenting their position on the issue, you'll know what the issue is by finding their position. Because the issue will be their position or not, or some other alternative. So for example, if someone says, we should not build the border wall because it would cost a lot of money and it would prove to be largely ineffective. Now in that case, the issue is whether we should build the wall or not. Because the person's position is, we shouldn't do it, and so the issue is, should we or shouldn't we? So the way to find an issue is, if in an argumentative essay or speech, is to look for the person's position. What is it that they're focusing on? And then that'll be their position, and the issue will be that position or not, or some alternative. And that's how to spot them. Now, as we'll see in the future, people can have all kinds of confusion, lack of clarity, which can make it hard to find issues. And people may throw all kinds of stuff into your speech or their words, or paragraphs, where you're trying to figure out, like, what are they even talking about? And of course, someone may throw in multiple issues, just jam a bunch in there, and so you've got, trouble finding a issue because there's a whole bunch of other ones stuffed in there as well. Now, when we look at how to write clearly and well, one of the key things is stick to one issue at a time and be clear about what that is and address that. And then if you're addressing multiple issues, address one, move on to the next one in a logical manner. Of course, the way to do a bad job at it is be really confusing about the position, be confusing about what the issue is, and then throw a whole bunch of other ones in there to make it even more of a mess. And that makes it hard to spot it. But we'll look at how to do it, clearly, but also how to do it badly, in case you do want to confuse people. Before pressing on our remaining minutes, anything about this that needs any more stuff? Now, the very soul and heart of critical thinking is the argument. So this is absolutely essential for critical thinking because it will infest the course throughout. So from here until the end, the argument stuff will always be relevant because it's all about the arguments. Now, in everyday life, people often talk about having arguments. And in normal usage, it means like a fight, a dispute, a battle. But philosophically, it need not be a fight, a dispute, or a battle. In fact, it can be very peaceful, and it can involve just one person. So, being technical about it, what's going on with an argument? Well, here's what an argument is. First thing, of course, is an argument is built out of multiple claims. And a claim is a statement that is true or false. And anything that meets that can be a claim. It can be something mundane like, I should have a bagel for breakfast, or it could be something like, there's a water bottle on the table, or it could be that we should get in a nuclear war with North Korea, because why not? Just get it over with. And so claims could be anything, ranging from the mundane to the abstract, from the brilliant to the stupid, and almost anything can be a claim if properly put together. Now, these claims, when they become part of an argument, transform from just a bunch of claims just stuck together to an argument by taking on various rules. To use an analogy, if you have a bunch of people just kind of throwing the ball around, or you don't have a baseball game going on. If you get a baseball game going on, you got to have people organized into two teams. They have various positions: first base, second base, third base, pitcher, catcher, etc. And that transforms a bunch of people just kind of tossing a ball around in the park to an actual baseball team, two teams in the game. Likewise for an argument, the claims that will be more than just like a bunch of claims kind of hanging out. They got to take on two particular roles. And here are the two roles. Every argument has one or more premises. And premises are the evidence or reasons being offered for the claim that's being supported. And every argument to get to that claim, every argument has one and only one conclusion. The conclusion is the claim you're trying to prove, what you're trying to establish, your point, your position on the issue. It is what is supported by the evidence offered in the premises. So when you get an argument, you have one claim, the conclusion, that's your point, what you're trying to prove. Then you back that up with one or more pieces of evidence or reasons that try to show, prove, establish the conclusion is true. So those are the two functions of the parts. So, smushing it all together, an argument is a set of claims, one of which, the conclusion, is supposed to follow from the others that provide evidence or reasons that are known as the premises. So, evidence or reasons, point being made. Now, a good example of this would be in law, like in a court. Literally, they offer evidence trying to prove a point. In the case of the prosecutor, they offer evidence to prove the claim the person is guilty. In the case of the defense attorney, they offer evidence and arguments and reasons to try to prove the person is innocent. Now, arguments come in a huge variety of forms and types. We'll close with two examples. One, to give an example of a really common deductive argument is this. Premise one. If today is Tuesday, then tomorrow is Wednesday. Premise two. Today is Tuesday. Conclusion, tomorrow is Wednesday. And that's an argument because I've given reasons as to why tomorrow is Wednesday. Another argument type is an argument by analogy. Now, analogies involve comparing one thing to another and saying that because the two things are alike in certain ways, they're alike in the way that you're concerned with. For example, suppose for some reason you were worried about the fairness of inheritance, people being able to inherit lots of money. And recently, of course, they changed the death tax, so now that people are only taxed, I think, for anything over like $11.8 million in that they give to people after they die. Now, one thing you can argue that inheritance is unfair is to use an analogy to Monopoly. Everyone played Monopoly? Are familiar with the game? Now, imagine you play Monopoly with this one variation. Suppose after you finish the game, whoever wins it puts all like their money and property and stuff, you keep a record of that. In the next game, you'd roll randomly to see who gets all their stuff. And when you play the game the next time, one player starts with all the previous winner's stuff, all their property and money, and everyone else starts off just normal. Now, would you play that version of Monopoly? No, because you get wiped. If you're not the person who's there, you just get wiped out because they already have all the stuff. So you could argue by analogy, if we think inheritance of that kind is unfair in games, why should we allow it in real life? Because if you're the one getting the stuff, super great. If you're not so good. And that'd be an argument by analogy. What is supposedly true of the game is supposed to be true of life. Now, of course, as we'll see in the future, you can argue against arguments as well. So good rest of the day. Be sure to sign the roll thing so I can get mark people's attending. And whoever has it last, be sure to gift me so I can mark people's attending.